Welcome to the Real Estate Talk podcast with myself, Oliver Ingalls, and my esteemed co-host, Benji Weinberger. If you learn anything from today's podcast, if you take out any tips, any nuggets of advice, we would love if you would like, subscribe, and share.
Absolutely loved, my journey up the career ladder, which, most people that know me know I started my career at Foxtons, which was amazing. It was a really fun place to work. If you've watched Wolf of Wall Street, it was like that.
I got up to that when you were younger, you wanted to be Prime Minister or an astronaut.
Yeah, I think, the astronaut and Prime Minister, let's not go there. Getting recruitment right is really, really difficult. And in the early days, I made mistakes, and that's really the only way you learn.
Yeah.
Fast forward 18 years, I can tell literally within about 30 seconds of someone walking into my office whether I'm going to hire them or not.
Nice, like that. The next guest, Camilla Dell.
Camilla is the owner of Black Brick Property, which has been going for just over 18 years and is widely seen as the #1 buying property service in the country. Her biggest deal is north of £50 million, and Camilla has won 9 awards from Spears 500 to Chambers and Private Client.
The Times named Camilla as one of the UK's most influential people working in property. And she's done $2 billion in sales, over 500 clients she's acquired for, with an average price of £4 million.
Camilla, thank you so much for joining us. I know you have your own podcast, and I know you've actually recorded a podcast in this very room. And I, in my research, was starting to watch it. And the host of that podcast said, go back to the beginning and show us your journey. And I was about to watch it, and that's usually how we start our podcast as well. And then I stopped watching because I wanted to hear it from you yourself. And I got up to that when you were younger, you wanted to be Prime Minister or an astronaut. So go back to the beginning in a snapshot and tell us what's led you to where you are today.
Yeah, I think, the astronaut and Prime Minister, let's not go there. But I think I was always really driven as a child growing up. Throughout my working career, I think quite early on, I sort of had this ambition and drive to do my own thing. I wasn't quite sure what that was, but I think, often when you speak to entrepreneurs, they say that they were kind of like born with it, like nobody, it's not something you can learn. It's like something that you're born with, it's genetic. So maybe I was sort of born with that slight dysfunction maybe. But yes, I think I always wanted to do my own thing and was pretty impatient throughout most of my working life to do my own thing. But, had really no regrets and absolutely loved, my journey up the career ladder, which, most people that know me know I started my career at Foxtons, which was amazing. I was there in the days before it was a PLC. It was a privately owned company. John Hunt, who I'm still on very good terms with to this day. It was a really fun place to work. If you've watched Wolf of Wall Street, it was like that. And it was a lot of fun, and I learned a huge amount. And then from there, I got headhunted by Knight Frank to go and work and be a buying agent for them. But really by that point, I think in my mind, the cast had already been dyed. I wanted to set up my own business. I really liked this concept of buy-side representation.
Yes.
And so I went to Knight Frank really to kind of test drive my business plan. And I wasn't there for very long. I was there for less than a year. And then I set up Black Brick in January 2007.
Amazing.
And here I am 18 and a half years later.
So when you first started Foxtons, had you always wanted to be in property? Or did you fall into it?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, the nostalgic romanticist in me, if I look back to my childhood, my late father, I unfortunately lost my dad when I was very young, when I was 9. But my father, not many people know this, he was an entrepreneur and he was a very successful property developer. He developed schemes in Bayswater, the Colonnades, which is like really dated building now, but in its day it was like the Six Senses Whiteley of what we have today.
Yeah.
You know, and so I remember my dad vividly working in property when I was very, very little. So I don't know whether, you know, they say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Did I always know I wanted to be in property? No, the honest truth is, you know, I studied marine biology at university. I just kind of went for things that interested me, that I really enjoyed doing. I knew that I really loved being with people. Yeah. And I also realized very early on that I was good at selling. You know, I became a scuba diving instructor at 18, and a staff instructor at 18, and I loved selling courses, and you know, I loved being with people. So I knew I had that skill set. And so I don't think I did always know that I wanted to work in property, but you know, I was lucky in the sense that I kept seeing these adverts for Foxtons in the Guardian. I used to read the Guardian newspaper in those days. I am not a Guardian reader anymore. I am now a Financial Times, Bloomberg, and the Times reader. But you know, I kept seeing their adverts. They were very, very, very catchy adverts. They were like people skydiving, jumping out of aeroplanes. Yeah. And I had just done that. I had been to South Africa. I'd left being a scuba diving instructor, and I went to South Africa, and I ticked off a whole load of things on my things to do before I die list, one of which was skydiving. And so the Foxtons ad really caught my eye, and I applied, and within a minute of sending in my application, HR were on the phone to me. And the next day I was at head office in Chiswick and at a drinks party with Pete Rollings, who used to be the old MD, standing on a beer crate saying they'd all just come back from, you know, a ski trip. And it was just, I felt immediately at home. I was like, this is a great place to work, to have fun, learn a lot, and also and make really good money. Yeah. Because at the time I was on, you know, I was working in the hotel industry. I was making like £15,000 a year, like really low wage. And it was exciting. So I don't think I did always know what I wanted to do, but I kind of followed my passion and followed my interests.
And Foxtons, you related that back to the Wolf of Wall Street earlier. And we had Igor on here a couple of weeks back, who also had an upbringing at Foxtons, you know, which again, very much like you said, an unbelievable upbringing in learning skill sets, training, etc. But also said, it's intense, super intense. Yeah. Is that what you found too?
Yeah, it definitely. It taught you how to structure your day. You know, there wasn't a lot of freedom when I was there, so it was very, very structured. It was a bit like the army, and John came from the army. So but that was great, because I was very young when I started at Foxtons. I was like in my early 20s. Like I didn't really know very much, so kind of having that opportunity to be trained in that way was great. And at the same time, I think they recognized that they were there was a lot of young people in the firm, and that young people want to have fun, but they wanted to make sure that the fun was had within the firm, because then you would stay longer and work longer and be more motivated and do more deals. And it was brilliant. It worked really well.
And so do you think the time that you had at Foxtons made you the agent or person that you are today?
I definitely think it had a role in it. It 100% taught me, you know, work ethic and that there are no shortcuts. I mean, you really had to work very hard at Foxtons. Like people that didn't work hard didn't last very long. So, you know, and you think if you now look at our industry and you see all the greats in the industry, a lot of those people learnt their trade at Foxtons when I was there. Yeah. We all know who they are, you know. So I think they definitely were doing something right.
Why do you think that those people who are now great, people like yourself that had that Foxtons, aren't still at Foxtons? Like when we look at those people now, they're all at majority of other companies. Why do you think they ultimately leave?
I think, you know, I think for me, I mean, I can't speak for other people, but for me, I think I always wanted to do my own thing. Like even at Foxtons, I remember they were advertising for the CEO of Shanghai. Like John wanted to open up offices globally. He wanted to open up an office. He did open up an office in New York, and then he wanted to open in Shanghai, and they were advertising for the role of CEO. And I applied.
Love that. Love that.
You know,
how old were you at the time?
I don't know, 26.
Brilliant. Love that.
25.
Yeah.
You know, I think for me, I always wanted to do my own thing. It was just a matter of time.
Yeah.
So usually with that in mind, people we've had on the podcast, they got to a point where they had to leave the corporate company they were in because they just wanted something different. It sounds like you already knew what you wanted to do. So there wasn't perhaps a period where you were nervous to leave Knight Frank because...
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I was nervous to leave. I think anybody that leaves a big corporate comfy job where you're on like a nice sort of, salary and it's all very nice and safe, that it feels a bit like jumping off a cliff. So I don't think it's true to say that I wasn't nervous to leave Knight Frank. Knight Frank definitely wasn't home for me.
Yeah.
The minute I got there, it was kind of that Wizard of Oz moment. It's like, we're not in Kansas anymore. It was like, oh God, it wasn't for me at all. So I don't think I would have lasted. I wouldn't have stayed very long anyway, even if I hadn't left to set up Blackbrick. But I think it's a nerve-wracking thing to do, to kind of leave the comfort of a corporate and be on your own. I mean, you guys know kind of the setup that you have at DDRE, right? You're kind of very much your own little businesses within a bigger business. So, I think anybody that does that is brave.
Yeah.
And then so 2007, you set up Blackbrick.
Yeah.
And then the world changes forever and crashes.
Yes.
How was that, setting up your business and then...
Yeah, it was actually an amazing time to be in real estate because, it was the financial crisis and people were scared, but people were scared of investing in the markets because you had things like the Madoff scandal happening as well. So people were really worried about investing their money into in the markets, but what they were very comfortable doing was investing in so-called safe haven assets, real estate. And if you think back to 2007, like the top rate of stamp duty was 2%. It was an overseas buy. You set up your SPV, no inheritance tax when you die, no capital gains tax when you come to sell. So the barriers to entry to the market were like almost zero.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And so from my perspective, the financial crisis was a great time to be a buying agent. We were very busy. We had lots of clients wanting to take advantage of the downturn in the market. All of my clients that bought properties with me in 2007 have done phenomenally well in terms of the capital growth they've seen.
I love that.
So, it was great.
And so you spent the majority, obviously, at the start of your career selling. And then obviously you decided to jump into the buyer's side. You say there was that passion for wanting to represent buyers, because again, it wasn't too common at the time. It's only really starting over the last, 4 or 5 years to become more and more common now to have representation, when you're working with buyers. That must have been a big jump. That must have been, again, quite a smaller industry being the buyer side. That was quite a risk, again, you took there.
Yeah. So I'll let you into a little secret.
Go on.
Let's make a good
We
start
like
by.
secrets, yeah.
I've never been an estate agent.
Yeah.
Ever. So my entire career at Foxtons was in corporate services.
Okay.
I didn't have a driving license. So I was never put in a front office and I was never an estate agent. Okay. I was in their corporate team and my role was to build relationship with FTSE 100 companies, banks, law firms, and say to those companies, if you have staff or clients needing help with their property searches in London, send them to me and I will be their main point of contact and handhold them throughout the process and make sure that all the best people at Foxtons look after these people.
Amazing.
And that's when I wrote my first business plan and showed it to John Hunt saying, look, this is a service that should be independent and people should pay for. And so I've actually never been an estate agent. I have only ever been a buying agent.
Love that. Yeah. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And so, as Ollie just touched on, it's insane that buyers don't have representation. And so what's been the difference that you've seen from kind of 2007 to now? Is it easier for you now getting clients because they understand they want someone like you in their corner?
Yeah, I think the concept of buying agents is much more prolific today than it was in 2007. So I find that I spend less time explaining to people what a buying agent is. Is it easier to get clients? I think from from my perspective, obviously having had a very successful buying agency firm for 18 and a half years, it means we've got track record and people know about us, and that gives comfort, and people come to us. We now get a lot of recommendations. We get a lot of repeat business. We've built some amazing relationships over a very long period of time. But I think the marketplace is crowded. I mean, there's 300 buying agents more. I mean, it's there's a lot of choice out there. So I don't necessarily think it's easier from a general market perspective, but definitely I think the market is much more aware that buying agents exist.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And do you find it difficult in as far as because there are now more buying agents, and one of the things that is so great about the buying agents is how discreet they are. Obviously, you touched on you've got a podcast, and I see other buying agents are quite vocal in certain newspapers and therefore branding themselves. How do you find that balance between trying to keep your brand at the front of mind for people whilst also trying to maintain the discretion that your clients will want?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about creating interesting content, which isn't disclosing anything confidential.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, So, the podcast that I have, it's called Finding Perfect Property, Diary of a Buying Agent, isn't really about talking about my clients and what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's about interviewing I bring on our little black book of contacts. We talk about how we, sort of problems in the buying process and how we can help with those problems. And, so it's more of interest to clients than divulging client secrets, the podcast.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the press, I mean, our exposure as a firm in the press is all sort of market commentary. You'll never find us talking about a deal that we've done. We just don't do that. Our clients don't want us to do that. We don't do that.
No, I like that. So as you touched on earlier, me and Benji have obviously started our own businesses underneath the brokerage of DDRE. And we quickly learned that you have to wear so many different hats. You have your marketing hat, you have your new business hat, you have your sales hat on, you have your accounts hat. And we have obviously just started also to grow our teams. What was it like? So when you started, was it just you when you started your business? And what kind of teething problems did you find at the start? What was those tough points in growing?
Yeah, it was me. It was me and one other person when I first started the business. I think the main challenge, if you've got a really successful business, which is a nice problem to have, is recruitment. Getting recruitment right is really, really difficult. And in the early days, I made mistakes, and that's really the only way you learn.
Yeah.
Fast forward 18 years, I can tell literally within about 30 seconds of someone walking into my office whether I'm going to hire them or not.
Nice, like that.
So I kind of, you develop this kind of radar, sixth sense, call it what you will. But I think one of the biggest challenges is recruitment and finding good people.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also part of the challenge is, hiring people that are different to you, but are better than you in things that you're not so good at, and sort of building the right team.
Great tip. Yeah.
And then trusting people. I think a lot of business owners can be quite paranoid and quite fearful, and then just and don't trust and give autonomy to people that work with them and around them.
Yeah.
And you'll never grow and succeed with a mindset like that.
Yeah.
And it's difficult because sometimes you get let down. Sometimes you hire people and you trust them and they let you down.
Yeah.
But, this is part of the process. So I think that is difficult.
Nice. And you're obviously a mother as well.
Yeah.
And you've been, you have a business, and we had Jessica Bishop obviously on one of our podcasts about how she'd love to be a mum in the future, but trying to juggle. I mean, I obviously have Alfie, my son, who's 4, so you're trying to juggle parenthood, being a mum, running a business, how did that work, and what was that period of your life like?
Yeah, I mean, it is not easy. I'd say, a big part of it is having the right support team around you. So that's from a really supportive partner. So there's no way, I don't think I could have set up my business without having Jeremy, my supportive husband, there supporting me, giving me encouragement to do that. In terms of having a family, I waited quite a long time. I think Black Brick was 6 or 7 years old at least before I had my first child, purposefully so. And then, what can I say? I had my baby, and within 3 days I was at a client pitch.
Wow.
I had a C-section. Not the best. I'm not advocating for that, but it's also about having the right support, and we've had a lot of help over the years from great, maternity nurses and nannies, and thankfully, we're both earners, so we've been able to afford that help, and it's made sense for us and our family. But you need to have a great support network around you. But it's not easy, and I think as a mum, there's definitely moments when you think, should I have spent more time at home? How's this impacting my kids? I never missed a school play, like golden rules, like never miss a school play, never miss an assembly, or a parents' evening. And I think, my kids are now older, and I feel like I've done the right thing because they look at me with a lot of respect, and I think they're really proud of their mum. And, and I think it sets a really good precedent in the household that mums can go out and have careers as well.
100%.
We've kind of moved quite a long way forwards to the dark ages. Yeah.
And go on, Benji.
No, I was going to say, if there was any advice that you could give, because we have a lot of younger generations watching this sort of podcast.
Yeah.
If there was a young lady that was watching who was about to embark on her career, what would you tell her?
Gosh, I think what I say to a lot of young people that kind of approach me and want to be buying agents is I say, look, learn your craft first. Like, a lot of people think for some reason being a buying agent is more glamorous and more fun, maybe easier than being an estate agent. It's none of those things. I always say to young people, look, if you want to get into this industry, there are no shortcuts. Take your time and learn your craft. Go and be an estate agent for one of the big companies, and learn as much as you can about the market and everything there is to know about this business, from all the professionals that work in it to, we're not tax advisors, but understanding how the conveyancing process works, what tax implications are of buying property, just really honing your skills and taking time to learn that is the best route to being a buying agent, I think. Is my advice. Don't be in a rush. I think lots of young people, and I was one of those people, I was always in a rush. I remember my boss at Foxtons, so I reported directly into Michael Brown, who's the CEO at the time, and then also John. And Michael used to say to me, life is a marathon, not a sprint. I was always in a rush, applying to be CEO in Shanghai, like rush. And it's good advice. It's difficult, when you're young and hungry and ambitious. It's great, but you just take your time to learn everything.
Yeah, super vital. So look, there's a big question which I wanted to ask, which I think is quite a hot topic now. Can a selling agent be a buying agent, and can a buying agent be a selling agent at the same time?
Yeah. Look, I think the answer is people are doing it, right? So of course it's possible. But I can tell you from my perspective, we have a tiny, tiny element of our business called managed sales. So we maybe sell 1 or 2 properties a year, if that. And it really grew out of the fact that clients we built long, trusted relationships with, when it came time to sell, they wanted our help. And that's why we have it. But I can tell you it's a massive distraction. And by far, it's better to stick in your lane, because it's fundamentally very different skill sets. Being a great estate agent is a very different skill set, in my opinion, to what buying agents do. So, and I also think from a consumer perspective, consumers, they don't want to work with, I don't believe people really want to work with hybrids when they understand what it's all about. It's like having a lawyer that's acting for both sides. Just doesn't work. So I think in an ideal world, the answer would be no. But as we know, there's lots of people out there just trying to get a fee and doing everything and trying to be all things to all people.
Yeah. And so do you think then a buying agent has a different skill set to an estate agent? You said you've never been an estate agent, and you're one of, if not the best buying agent in London. She didn't pay me to say that. But so do you think it's a different skill set for a buying agent to estate agent?
I do. I think it's very different. I really think it's very different. Look, as an estate agent, you're representing the seller, and you're out there to devise a strategy, whatever that strategy is going to be, to try and sell that property. And that can be so many different routes to market. As a buying agent, you don't have to think about any of that. That's not required. That is not required. What's required as a buying agent is deep, deep knowledge of the market, amazing contacts with everybody, you know, and the ability to really think outside the box to try and find the right property for your client, you know, even if that means knocking on someone's door, you know, and being creative, and a lot of report writing. I mean, we write really analytical, long reports to clients before they submit offers on properties. You know, you don't have to do things like that as an estate. So it is really a different skill set.
So with the emergence of AI and the technology out there now, I mean, look, a lot's changed since 2007 to where we are now. How are you utilizing it in your business?
Yeah, I mean, we've invested in software that enables us to very quickly bring up data of properties that are not on the market that might be right for clients, and very quickly target those properties. So from that perspective, it's very, very helpful. But I think I think the future is bright, I hope, for a relationship with property and AI. I think we're just scratching the surface with it at the moment. I think it would be great if things like the conveyancing process could be speeded up somehow by using AI. I don't know how that's going to work. But, you know, I think our industry is very, very, very it's not smooth. You know, the whole buying process is very clunky and it takes a hell of a long time. And if there's some way that AI can come along and help with that and help speed up, make things more efficient for sellers and buyers and people working in the industry, then that's great. I'm not seeing that filter through right now in terms of anything that anyone's using.
And I think you're part of them too. We've obviously got quite a few WhatsApp groups. I mean, there's a million out there now. I think I got added to one this morning, and you kind of look at who's in it and it's like, okay, mute. I don't think this is going to be much beneficial to me. But those WhatsApp groups, I know even for me over the last 2 years of running my own business, I've created 1 or 2 deals. How has that also changed now with collaborating with agents? And like you said earlier, you have to have a great contact book and be friends with everybody because you never know when you're going to need that person. But again, how has those relationships changed over the years that you've had with selling agents?
I mean, it's multiplied by 7x at least. I mean, you know, when I first set up Black Brick, if we were doing a search, you know, for a £10 million house in Belgravia, Mayfair, Knightsbridge, I might have picked up the phone to half a dozen agents. Fast forward to today, and my team will be picking up the phone to, it could be 100, 150 agents. You know, so the sheer volume of people working in the industry has exploded. I think there's 7,400 estate agents now in central London. It's just exponential growth. So our jobs as buying agents have become much more time consuming because we have so many more people that we need to speak to, and so many more ways of getting to those people, whether that's WhatsApp, whether it's email, our own email distribution lists that we manage, whether it's online platforms. You know, there's so many routes to market to get the message out there that you're looking. But fundamentally, you know, the best relationships are the ones that you build and nurture over time. And inevitably, you know, those bear the most fruit, and that there's no quick fix for that.
100%.
I'd love to hear your view on, because you're quite independent from the estate agency world, and as far as you're not an agent yourself. So everything that's happening over the last couple of years with the emergence of Sotheby's, DDRE Global, the brokerages. What's your take on everything that's happening on that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the big agents, I think, you know, just got used to being the top dogs. And so I think that there was definitely room for some disruptors to come along and offer something a bit different. So I think it's great for consumers. I think it's great for sellers that they now have a lot more choice in terms of who they appoint to sell their property. And you know, and that can only be a good thing. As far as I'm concerned, as a buying agent, what we're saying to our clients is there's now 7,400 estate agents in London. Are you going to do you really have time to speak to them all on your search?
Yeah.
And if you don't speak to them all, then you'll never really know if you are buying the right property,
Yes.
or the best property that you could have found. So the fact that there are more and more and more and more agents for us as buying agents is a positive thing, because I think with that, the market becomes so much more complex and difficult for buyers to navigate.
And look, like you said, now you have to speak to so many agents, people that you probably also never heard of before, and then suddenly they're introducing 10, 15, 20 million pound properties. Regulation in the industry. We've been a big believer, and we spoke about it on other podcasts about that. We feel that regulation needs to come into our industry. What are your thought processes with that? And what experiences have you had, maybe negative as well, which have ultimately, made deals collapse because of an agent in his infancy or not being regulating that in that way?
Look, I'm all for regulation if it really is going to help everybody, help the seller, help the buyer, help us get our transactions done in a shorter time frame. Then regulation is a great thing. But regulation just for the sake of regulation is just pointless. So I'm a believer in it if it's really going to help everybody and help and help buyers and help sellers. I think the problem with our industry is not just about the fact that anyone can be an agent. It's also that there's not the only real due diligence that's done is KYC, because we all have to do it, and that's regulated and it's the law. But that's it. An agent can take a property onto their books to sell without really knowing that much about the property.
Yeah.
And for example, they might be marketing something which actually is unsaleable because the seller hasn't got the necessary permissions to have done the works that they've done.
Yep.
And you get it under offer. The buyer spends loads of money on, surveys and legal fees, and then the whole deal collapses. Well, actually, had that agent done proper DD and or had there been some onus on the seller to have everything ready before you bring a property to market, would avoid it. It's those sorts of situations and it's those sorts of things that I think the industry needs regulation around.
Yeah, 100%.
So if you saw a joint listing with said agent, would you then lean towards going through the other agent?
You mean if we'd had a bad experience with an agent who'd brought something to market that was unsaleable?
That maybe you thought that it could have been handled better. Would you try to avoid an agent?
So I think if we have a choice, I think if there's a property that's on the market with two agents and we have a choice of agents, we're obviously going to pick up the phone to the agent we have the better relationship with. Absolutely. Because that's how deals get done.
Yeah. And in the early stances of when you were building a business, and again, we could talk about ecosystems, like you said earlier, where you have to have your kind of ecosystem of lawyers, of interior designers, of currency brokers and wealth managers. How did you kind of build up that knowledge and build up that kind of ecosystem yourself?
Just by being in the industry for almost 2 decades.
Yeah. And did you go meet them? Did you take people out for coffees, or do you still do it?
I still do it.
Yeah.
Networking never stops. Building relationships with good people never stops.
Yeah.
It's full time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as a business, you've done £2 billion worth of transactions, which is about 500 transactions. What percentage of those would you say is referrals / repeat business versus Joe Bloggs calling your office landline?
Yeah, I mean, referrals and repeat business makes up, I would say, at least 50% of our client base today, at least.
Nice.
Yeah, it's significant.
Are you starting to go around the globe as well? Like we know that now a client, not has one agent that they kind of know and trust. And like you said before, sometimes they've come back and said, Camilla, I only trust you. I want you to deal with the sales side, for example. But I presume then they come to you and then also sometimes say, look, now I need to buy my country home, or I want to buy a place in Paris, a pied-à-terre here. And how do you deal with that? And do you evolve into those emerging markets as well?
Yeah, we've built up a network of great buying agents that we refer work to. So, we've just done an acquisition through a partnership that we have in Berlin. Last year we did something in Paris. We've done things in New York. It's not black brick operating in those markets. I don't have people with boots on the ground there.
Yeah.
But what we've done is built an amazing network of other buying agents in key cities where we know our clients like to buy real estate.
Yeah.
So we can continue to look after them.
Nice.
Yeah.
And for those people then wanting to start their own business, whether it be a sales agency or a buying agency, what do you think now in this day and age is the most critical piece of advice that you would give those people?
To start their own.
Yeah, if they want it, say they've had, let's say someone's out this now, has had 10 years worth of experience and they're kind of on the cusp of getting to the positions that maybe we all were, 2 or 3 years ago for me and you, Ben, in 2007 for you, where you're like, you have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit. You feel that you've created your groundwork and your structure of knowing the work, knowing the industry inside out. What are the key tips that you would give those people in the first year or two of business to become successful?
Oh gosh. I mean, work out who your target market is, work out where you're going to get your clients from, who your customer, how are you going to get clients? Yeah. Is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, the barriers to entry is small. Anyone can print a business card and say they're an agent.
Yeah.
There's this lack of regulation. But at the end of the day, if you've got no business plan and no way of getting clients, then you've got no business.
Yeah. Let's go.
And so fast forward, quick maths in my head, 2007 to 2025, 18 years of Black Brick. Is there anything you would have done differently?
Anything I would have done differently? We spoke about the recruitment thing. So I think if I knew now what I knew then, I may not have made some of the same decisions on the recruitment front. I think I might have been braver, taken a few more risks, opened up Black Brick in a few more places.
Is that still on the cards?
Yeah.
Watch this space.
So what is are you going to be growing in the UK? What is the plan for Black Brick moving forward?
Yeah, we have grown. So this time last year we expanded into the West Country. So we've got an amazing team down there covering Devon, Cornwall, Dorset, Somerset. And the plan is definitely to find more great people to help us expand our offering within the UK. We also have a very successful and growing property management side to the business. So we help look after clients' homes for them and their investment properties. So that's a really exciting part of the business for us now as well.
Nice. Is there anything that keeps you awake at night with your business?
I try not to. I think as you get older and wiser, you kind of put things into perspective.
Yeah.
And whilst I deeply, deeply care, I think to be an effective leader and a good business owner, you've also got to look after yourself as well and know when to switch off and have downtime.
Yeah. And that is important, and I think that's something that we're all still trying to learn, really, how to manage our time and our families and, partners and relationships with everybody else. Have you kind of found a system where, look, you've built a team now. It's not just you, or your business partner as well that you had at the start where you had to. There was no one else to do it. And you've got people that you obviously can trust now. Is it now easier, actually, to kind of have that time to say, right, do you know what? I'm going away on holiday for a week with the kids and the family, and I've got my team behind me. Is that easier now?
Yeah, I think if you've got a great team and you give autonomy to those team members, to do a great job, and they're capable, then theoretically, yes, it's easier. But ultimately, as a business owner, the buck always stops with you. And that never really goes away. But the better the team is around you, I wouldn't say easier, but the more successful the whole business is, really.
Nice. Right. So we've got some quick fire questions that we always tend to finish off our podcast with. And these are quick fire. So it's normally one sentence answers. Okay. Ben, do you want to start?
What is your most expensive acquisition?
I can't divulge exact figures for confidentiality reasons, but in excess of 50 million.
Love that. Amazing. You hate driving. How do you avoid it in this sector when you run around all of London?
I'm a big fan of taxis.
Yeah. Not an Uber. You're still with that. Let's
cabs.
Keep the black cabbies. Yeah, love that. Amazing.
What is the most amount of referrals one client has given you?
Gosh. I can think of one client or a couple of clients that we looked after who then passed our name around their community, and it led to at least half a dozen clients. Yeah.
And I suppose this isn't actually a quick fire one, but this has come to me. You must now be seeing now your business, the generation, so that you've acted on behalf of a client back in 2007. Now you're dealing with the daughter or the son, and maybe not just yet getting into their pit and whatnot, but how many generations really have you actually seen through that you would have thought?
2, because I'm not that old.
No, but I suppose it could have been someone at 80, 90 now. They could have been in 40 now. They're at the 20s or something like that. But
2, it's still 2.
Okay, another quick question then. What's the youngest client you've dealt with, age-wise?
I mean 18, because you can't legally buy a property and be on the title. So we do have clients coming to us who are buying for their kids.
Yes. Yeah.
So technically it's the child buying the property, but ultimately it's the parents helping a lot.
Love that.
Yeah.
Any more, Benj?
No. That's
Last one here then. And this was actually asked in by another one of our viewers. What neighborhood would you buy as an investment if you had to put your money somewhere? Okay. What neighborhood would you go and buy something in today?
Gosh, that is really tricky, because I think as property people, as much as we love to think about pounds per square foot and where's up and coming and what transport links are going in that might mean you get more capital appreciation, I think ultimately you can't stop that emotional side
100%.
creeping in.
Yeah.
So I feel like I should be saying like East London, but I just never go there. So it just wouldn't be. It would probably be, I still think Bayswater has a way to go.
Yes.
I still think that area is really interesting from an investment perspective, and
Agreed.
It's still central London.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you. We're also looking forward to our invitation onto your podcast at some point. I must have got lost in the post, so I presume we'll have to look into that.
I'm still waiting for my backdated invite to your launch party.
And that is also
You've got to speak
true.
to Danny about that.
We'll speak to the Royal Mail about that one too. But thank you ever so much for coming on. You're incredibly busy. We appreciate your time a lot. And actually it's been really insightful. We've had other people on the podcast, and a lot again from a sales background, so it's really interesting to hear, and again truly inspiring for people.
And we wanted to have a different approach, and we wanted to get the best buying agent on, and we've recently closed a deal together. I dealt with yourself and obviously Tom and your team. It was a pleasure working with you guys, so we're very, very grateful for you coming onto our podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And so for the people that are watching, where do they find you?
So you can find us by going to the Black Brick website, which is www.black-brick.com.
Nice, love that. And you're across social platforms as well.
We are on social, so Black Brick, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. You can find me personally on LinkedIn. I am on Instagram, but it's private profile, but on LinkedIn, that is open, that's public, and I do a lot of kind of thought leadership pieces on LinkedIn, so you can find me there.
Amazing.
Camilla Dell.
Super. Thank you ever so much. It's been inspiring. We'll see you soon.